So I gave a talk today here at AdFest, and it was a bit serious, I think, particularly as it was the first talk of the day. And I was really making a number of points about the industry, and I framed it as here are 4 challenges that the industry has to address if it's going to prosper in the long term. And the first one was about talent recruitment and retention, because it's more difficult getting talented people to come into the advertising industry than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. The second point was about demographic and ethnic diversity, because in most parts of the world, advertising is pretty middle class and doesn't try and recruit from a broader talent pool. The third point was about gender balance, and very much the same issue there. It's not good for the business that so many women find it difficult to stay in the business as they progress, for reasons which we could talk about. And the fourth point was about how digital and the investment in digital, the increasing investment in digital, is burying, to a certain extent, the importance of craft and creativity in engaging with consumers and building brands. Talent recruitment and retention issue is sort of very multifaceted and complicated. But the things that are preventing people coming into the industry are that in many countries, the cost of living in big cities is prohibitively expensive. And for young people starting their careers, unless your parents have accommodation, it's very difficult. And something as banal as that is genuinely a deterrent. In many countries, universities either always have or have started to charge tuition fees, and this is a deterrent. And people might think, well, I might as well start working at 18 as opposed to 3 years at university, where I amass $50,000 or $60,000 worth of debt. So those things are problematical in many countries across the world. On the other side, what's happening in advertising agencies is that clients are paying less money for more work, and the talent pool is less than it used to be because agencies can't afford to employ so many people. And at the same time, there's less money being invested in brand building work. So much more, all the increases in advertising money are going into digital, which tends to be short-term and tactical. So there are less briefs that are satisfying to work on, and more programmatic buying and targeting, and some automation is coming in. And that's changed the nature of the job for creative people in particular, but actually for everyone. So all these things add up to a less attractive environment. And there's a third factor, which is advertising agencies, because they're sort of under the cosh, if that is an understood phrase, from clients, are kind of less able to innovate, originate, take the risks creatively that they used to. And they tend to have become, in many cases, just sort of order takers. They do what the client tells them. And most young people, millennials, want more than that in their creative lives. If they're going to become creative practitioners, they want to feel that there is some purpose in their creative lives. They want to be able to feel that their skills can be put to good uses as well as commercial uses. And ideally, the same thing, good and commercial become one and the same thing. So all these factors are combining, and it's, technology companies, startups, clients bringing creative capability in-house. The creative community as we knew it sort of doesn't exist anymore. It's dispersed, fractured, and I think all those things, if that's a coherent account, have made it less attractive for people who 15, 20 years ago would have been attracted by advertising and design. The diversity issue and the gender balance issue are obviously part of the same thing, but they are slightly different, and they have different causes and potentially different solutions as well. So the first thing you mentioned, which is diversity, I take to mean sort of demographic and ethnic diversity. So most of us live in very multicultural societies, but most advertising agencies tend to be kind of middle class, and in Europe and North America they tend to be very white. So we don't recruit from huge parts of the population who have amongst them as many talented people as the part of the population where we do recruit. And that's stupid. And the reason we don't do it is because it's easier not to, and it's more expensive to do it. So agencies, because they're lazy and because they are under this pressure from clients, tend to do what they've always done, which is recruit from conventional universities, and you miss out this whole pool of talent. In fact, demographic diversity in agencies has got worse over the time that I've been in the business, because a lot of working class, mainly guys, it has to be said, went to art school, they came from reasonably deprived backgrounds and made it into advertising, and they provided some diversity. That's gone away almost entirely now. I'm talking about Europe here. And in ethnic communities, minority ethnic communities, there are often active barriers to entry. In other words, mums and dads say, that's not a proper job, become a lawyer, become an accountant, become a doctor, become a pharmacist. So, lazily, the ad agency business doesn't bother. So we at D&AD, which is what I talked about this morning, have started this night school for creatively talented people who don't have a degree. And we've run it twice in London now, once in New York. It's become a regular part of our program. And there are hundreds of thousands of people out there who, if they knew about our industry, would love to get into it. And this is a means for them to get into it. It's a night school, so they don't have to give up their day job. They don't have to roll the dice at the beginning. They can wait till the end of the course to see whether they have got what it takes to make it in the industry. And we've put about 60 people through it now, 55, 60 people through the 3 schools that we've run. And about 32 of them are now making a living in our industry. And it's not a big thing in its own right, but it's very copyable. And what we hope will happen is it'll set an example to other industries. Clients want much more diversity in their agency teams because they sell to racially, ethnically, politically diverse audiences, and they need people who understand those audiences to provide them with their solutions. The gender balance thing is slightly different. And it's a societal issue. It's not just advertising. Although most of the stuff that is advertised, that we advertise on behalf of our clients, is bought by women, and yet women are grotesquely underrepresented in creative departments. And of course, as we all know, as you go more senior, women are less and less well represented. So I think the figure in Europe is that about 12% of agency creative directors are female, not quite reflecting the population, and about 8% of agency leaders, CEOs, are female. And once again, it's this ridiculous waste of talent and experience. And it happens because the industry doesn't make any attempt to enable women to come back to work after they've had a family, and society doesn't encourage men to take their share of childcare, housework, whatever women traditionally and stupidly have had to do. So we run a program with Google called RARE, which is a 3-day course. We ran it in Sydney in November. We're about to repeat it at the D&AD Festival in April. And it's a 3-day workshop, and it's designed to give a cohort of mainly women, not just women though, the sort of understanding, tools, methodologies, ideas to take on the patriarchy and win in order to optimize their career possibilities. And the idea, this has been designed to enable us to create this larger and larger cohort of empowered women who will eventually run the business and cause the change that everyone sensible wants to see. The internet, digital platforms, it consumes an enormous amount of content, most of which the people that it's aimed at ignore. And because it's ignored, the people making it don't really care much about it either. And so a big part of our business now is being done by people who don't care enough about what they're doing to do it well. And I don't know which is chicken and which is egg, but the fact is that because it's not very good, it's ignored. And I think actually it's ignored because people don't come on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter to look at advertising. They come on to do what they're doing. And that disease, if that's what it was, has started to affect the whole industry. And I have this is a made-up statistic, as you will immediately realise, but 80% of everything is crap, right? 80% of everything, food, interviews, festivals, but definitely 80% of advertising has always been rubbish, okay? Which means that you have to try very hard to be part of the 20% in order to stand out, to be noticed in the first place, to be liked, to be able to give the receiver of this a little bit of a gift in exchange for her attention, his or her attention. And I think that basic concept of what we do is being lost. And the idea now is if you just pop something up in front of someone, that counts as a hit, and you can record it almost in real time. And if you're a marketing director, you know, that makes your job in the short term easier because it's accountable. You can count it, you can put the tick in the box. And long-term brand building is much more difficult and much more difficult to measure, particularly in the short term. So there are a few good briefs. But, and I think this applies across the whole piece, if you do want to stand out and engage with people and persuade them to do something, even if it's just to buy something, then you have to do what we've always done, which is to be charming, well-crafted, witty, funny, you know, emotional, whatever means we're using to engage people's attention. And so it becomes more, not less important to pay attention to creativity and craft and to value those things and to nurture them. And right now, we're heading in the opposite direction, I fear, as an industry. And that's a shame. Well, agencies need to re-examine the way they do things for the reasons that we've been talking about, which is talent will go elsewhere and our industry will be poorer. You know, if we don't address the diversity issue, we're missing out on this huge pool of talent, which we need. And if we don't address the gender balance issue, women will stop coming into advertising and go into professions where they are treated properly, equally, which they're not at the moment. And for those reasons, we have to think about those things, but we're not alone in that. The craft and creativity thing is particular to advertising and design. And I have to think it's important that if you're going to do something, you do it well, because the good stuff creates better outcomes than the bad stuff. That's not, by the way, an answer to your question. So the answer to the question is the industry has changed irrevocably over the last 5, 10, 15 years. And the old style of network agency, you know, with 120 agencies in 97 countries is dead. I mean, it still exists, but big clients are halving their rosters, halving their budgets, pumping more and more money into digital. And what will happen is the industry, which is what it's always done, will reinvent itself. But the way in which it's changing at the moment is that people who call themselves creative practitioners don't just exist in creative departments in advertising agencies anymore. They're going to all kinds of other places, technology companies, you know, other kinds of social enterprises and startups, starting their own businesses. And actually, there's quite an interesting and growing trend for brand owning companies to take those creative capabilities in-house. So Nike, which is a company that's been built on great advertising, is actually creating in-house creative capabilities in some of its big markets, London being one of them. So there's a kind of creative diaspora, if that's a good word, occurring where people who would have gone to advertising agencies and design companies are now looking to pursue their creative careers in other places. And I unfortunately haven't got a crystal ball, and I have no idea where that's going to end up.